Welcome to my channel. Before we begin, let me ask you something real. Have you ever been laughed at just for speaking English wrong? Has one mistake ever made you want to stay silent forever? What if I told you that the same people who once laughed at my English now come to me for help? Sounds like a movie, right? But this is real. This is my story, and maybe it's yours too. In this video, I'll take you through every moment. How I went from being laughed out of classrooms to leading spoken English workshops, from being called the quiet one to being the voice others follow. So, if you've ever been afraid to speak, or if you think your English isn't good enough, you're in the right place. We're going to laugh, reflect, and learn through the real ups and downs of one unforgettable journey. I'll even share how I used to practice in front of a mirror, talk to myself, and survive the embarrassment just to speak one sentence right. Here's a fun challenge. Can you remember the first English sentence you ever said out loud? Was it perfect? Or was it just brave? Drop it in the comments. And while you're at it, ask yourself, are you practicing enough to turn your mistakes into milestones? Because I'm going to show you exactly how I did it with zero coaching, zero money, and nothing but consistency. This isn't just about English. It's about courage, confidence, and never letting anyone's laughter silence your dream. Ready to hear what happened after the laughs faded? Let's begin. They laughed the first time I opened my mouth to speak English. I still remember standing in front of my classmates, nervous and shaking, trying to pronounce the word comfortable, but saying it so wrong that the room burst into laughter. Their laughs weren't kind. They were sharp and loud, and they stayed in my head long after school ended. That one word, one moment, planted the seed of fear in me. The fear of speaking English. I went silent. In class, I would avoid eye contact with the teacher, hoping they'd never call my name. During conversations, I would only nod and smile, even if I didn't understand what was said. I was labeled the quiet one, not because I didn't have things to say, but because I didn't have the courage to say them in English. That label followed me everywhere, and I hated it. But deep inside, I promised myself something. One day, I would speak so well that even the loudest laughers would listen in silence. At home, no one spoke English. My parents didn't go to school, and there were no books, no internet, and no one to guide me. But I had an old dictionary and a cheap radio that sometimes caught English news channels. That became my classroom. I would listen for hours, trying to catch even a single word I understood. I would pause, repeat, mimic the pronunciation again and again, even when I wasn't sure what I was saying. I created my own English world in silence, one where I wasn't being judged. I wrote new words in a notebook and made up sentences in my head, imagining conversations I could never have in real life. I practiced speaking in front of a broken mirror in our tiny room, watching my lips move, correcting myself. I stumbled, stammered, mispronounced, but I kept going. Each word I spoke to myself was a rebellion against the laughter I had faced. I remember one day, in the market, a tourist asked me for directions in English. My heart raced. I wanted to help, but fear wrapped around my tongue like chains. I hesitated, then finally pointed and said, "There, go straight left." It was broken, but it was English. The tourist smiled and said, "Thank you, very clear." That smile stayed with me for weeks. It gave me hope. Maybe I wasn't completely useless after all. That tiny sentence proved that I could make sense even in my broken English. From that day, I began to use English outside too. I go to shops and say thank you instead of shukriya. Ask how much instead of kitna. Little by little, English became a part of my daily life, and slowly the fear began to fade. It wasn't magic, it was consistency. When I got a secondhand phone, I discovered something life-changing: YouTube. I found videos on English pronunciation, grammar, daily conversations, and motivational stories of people like me. I felt like I had discovered a secret world. I would watch one video every day and repeat the sentences out loud. I would pause and shadow the speaker word by word. I kept a daily goal: learn 5 new words, speak 5 new sentences. No one knew I was doing this. I didn't tell my family, my friends, or my classmates. This was my mission, my silent war against shame. I started practicing English with a voice recording app, listening to my own voice and improving it. The more I heard myself speak, the more confident I became. I started commenting on English videos, joining live sessions, even messaging strangers to practice. Most didn't reply, but a few kind ones encouraged me. Every small moment of progress became fuel for the next step. One day in class, something unexpected happened. The teacher asked if anyone could explain a difficult English paragraph from the book. No one raised their hand. I could feel my heart pounding, and before I knew it, I raised mine. Silence filled the room. Everyone turned to look at me. My mouth opened, and the words came out. Not perfect, not fast, but clear. I translated the passage into simple English, then explained it in Urdu. The teacher smiled. My classmates didn't laugh this time. They listened. After class, one of the boys who had mocked me the most came to me and asked, "How did you learn that? Can you help me too?" That moment changed everything. I had gone from being the joke to being the guide. The boy who once laughed at me now wanted to learn from me. And I realized then, success doesn't need to be shouted. It speaks for itself. After that day in class, everything changed. People started noticing me, not for my silence, but for my ability. The same classmates who once laughed at my broken sentences now asked me how I improved so fast. At first, I didn't know what to say. I hadn't done anything magical. I had just practiced consistently, failed quietly, and kept trying in silence. I told them about my daily English routine, how I used free YouTube channels, practiced in front of a mirror, and recorded my voice. Some didn't believe me. They thought I had taken expensive classes or had a tutor. But the truth was, my teacher was my own failure, and my classroom was my struggle. I started helping a few of them after school. We'd sit in the park with old notebooks, practicing sentences, correcting each other, laughing at our mistakes. But not with mockery, this time with kindness. I felt proud, not just because I was improving, but because I was now able to lift others who had once pushed me down. I still faced challenges. My grammar wasn't perfect. My vocabulary was limited, but I learned to communicate. That was my real goal, not perfection, but connection. I started volunteering to give small presentations in class. My hand still shook, but my voice didn't crack anymore. Each time I stood up to speak, I reminded myself of the boy who couldn't say one word without being laughed at. And now here he was, explaining ideas in English to a room full of students. I began writing short stories in English. Nothing fancy, just simple ideas. I would read them aloud to practice my fluency and post them in English learning groups online. To my surprise, people started liking them, sharing them, even asking for more. I realized I had something valuable to offer, not just knowledge, but experience. I wasn't teaching like a professional, but sharing like a survivor, someone who had been through the embarrassment, the silence, and the pain, and come out stronger. One evening, I got a message from a boy in another city. He said he saw my comment on a YouTube video and visited my profile. He said my story inspired him, and he had also been laughed at for his English. He asked me if I could guide him. That message hit me hard. For years, I thought my story didn't matter. But now, it was helping someone else. I started a small WhatsApp group for English learners like me. We practiced together, sent voice notes, corrected each other's sentences, and most importantly, encouraged each other. Slowly, the group grew. More people joined. Some were beginners, some better than me, but all of us shared one thing. We had been mocked, doubted, or discouraged, but we were still trying. That group became my family. Every day, we motivated each other, celebrated progress, and turned failures into lessons. I saw my past self in many of them, and I promised to be the support I once needed. My school teachers also started noticing the change. One of them invited me to help organize a spoken English workshop, standing in front of juniors, teaching them how to pronounce words, how to overcome fear. It was surreal. Just a year ago, I couldn't even speak without freezing, and now I was guiding others. During the workshop, I shared the same methods I had used: daily speaking practice, mirror conversations, voice recording, watching English news and cartoons, and never skipping practice. One student raised his hand and asked, "Didn't people make fun of you?" I smiled and said, "Yes, they did. And that's why I became better." That line stayed with them. The workshop ended with applause, and many students came to me asking for my notes. I gave them freely. I wanted no one to feel what I had felt: alone, ashamed, or stuck. If my story could be a bridge, I wanted everyone to walk across it. The boy who used to avoid eye contact in class now looked people in the eye while speaking. I started making short English videos, just speaking simple sentences, giving tips, sharing my journey. I didn't have a fancy camera or studio. I used my old phone, natural light, and my heart. I posted them online with captions like "Practice English with me" or "From silence to speaking." Slowly, people started watching. They commented things like, "This is real. I feel the same. You've given me hope." My videos weren't perfect, but they were honest. That honesty connected with people. I was not teaching English like a grammar book. I was living it like a story, and others related to that. My followers grew, not in millions, but enough to form a community. People sent messages from villages, cities, even other countries, saying they were inspired. And every time someone said, "You helped me," I remembered the laughter I once faced, and I smiled, not with revenge, but with victory. As my journey continued, I started setting higher goals. I challenged myself to read English books, even if I didn't understand every word. I would underline new vocabulary, write the meanings beside them, and try to use them in sentences during the day. Reading gave me confidence in structure and flow. Soon, I began to dream in English. I started thinking in English. It became a natural part of my daily life. I wasn't translating in my head anymore. I was expressing. That shift changed everything. It wasn't just about language now. It was about mindset. I believed I could learn anything if I was consistent. English had taught me more than grammar. It had taught me discipline, self-belief, and how to rise after being knocked down. My confidence overflowed into other parts of my life. I started participating in group discussions, applying for internships, and even helping my teachers prepare classroom materials in English. I was no longer the boy who waited to be picked. I volunteered. One day, during a community event, a local NGO invited volunteers for an English-speaking drive for underprivileged students. I joined, expecting to help, but what I received was more than I gave. I saw kids like me, nervous, unsure, afraid of being laughed at. I recognized their silence because I had lived in it. I used my story to reach them. I told them how I once couldn't pronounce simple words, how I practiced with shadows and mirrors, and how I had turned every insult into inspiration. They listened, wide-eyed and hopeful. That was when I realized my story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to anyone who had ever felt small because of their English. From that day, I started writing my journey as a blog. Not for fame, not for money, but to leave a map behind for others. I wanted no one to feel lost in the darkness like I did. My blog reached students, teachers, parents, and even job seekers. Then came a day I never imagined. One of my old classmates, the one who had laughed the hardest during my first failed attempt at English, sent me a message on Facebook. He said he'd seen one of my videos shared in a group and had no idea I had come this far. His words were honest. "I'm sorry. We shouldn't have laughed. You've really become something. Can you help me improve my English too?" That message brought tears to my eyes. Not because I wanted revenge, but because it proved that time changes everything and persistence wins. I replied, "Of course I'll help you. Let's start today." That was my full circle, from being mocked to becoming a mentor, from being the quiet kid in class to leading a community of learners. Every mistake I made, every time I was laughed at, it all led me here. And I wouldn't change a single moment of it. Today, when I speak on stage, record a video, or guide someone online, I do it with gratitude. I know there are still millions like me, afraid to speak, ashamed of their accent, unsure of their words. To them, I say, your mistakes are not failures. They're the steps of your staircase. Keep climbing. Don't wait for the world to stop laughing. Prove them wrong with results. I didn't have resources, but I had a reason. I didn't have support, but I had struggle. And that was enough. English was never just a language to me. It was my freedom. It unlocked a version of myself I never knew existed. The version that speaks, that leads, that uplifts others. Now, when I look back, I don't hear the laughter anymore. I hear my own voice, clear, confident, and kind. The boy who once stuttered now helps others speak. And that, to me, is the real definition of success. I never thought my voice would carry beyond my classroom, but one day I received an email from a local language institute. They had seen my blog and videos and wanted me to come and speak to their students. I read that email 5 times to make sure it was real. Just a few years ago, I was scared to say hello in English, and now a language institute wanted to hear from me. That moment reminded me how far I had come, not just in language, but in belief. I accepted the invitation and began preparing for my first ever public seminar. I wrote my points in English, practiced day and night, refined my sentences, and even timed my speech. When the day came, I stood in front of over 100 students. My hands were trembling, but my heart was steady. I began with my story. As I spoke, I saw heads nodding, eyes wide with connection, and students leaning forward to listen. Not one laugh, not one smirk, just attention, respect, and inspiration. After the session, students came up to me asking for tips, taking pictures, and calling me sir. That word hit me deeply. I had once been invisible in a room like this. I had once been laughed out of such spaces. But now I stood respected, admired, and valued. I realized then that true transformation isn't about impressing people. It's about inspiring them. And you can inspire without having suffered, without falling and getting back up. My failures have become my power. My voice, once shaky and uncertain, had become my strength. I started writing more blogs, creating structured video playlists for beginners, and hosting weekly live practice sessions for people who couldn't afford classes. Some were housewives, some students, some even older than me. But all of them had one thing in common. They wanted to speak, and they wanted someone who believed in them. I became that person. My parents, who once didn't understand my obsession with English, now proudly introduced me to guests as our son, who speaks English and helps others. Their pride was silent, but powerful. My younger siblings started copying my speaking habits. They would repeat words after me, ask questions, and even watch English cartoons instead of local ones. Our household slowly transformed. We began mixing English words into daily conversation. What had once felt like an unreachable language was now part of our family. That change meant more to me than anything else. Because success isn't only what you achieve, it's also what you inspire around you. My neighborhood also took notice. A shopkeeper once told me, "Your story has motivated my son to speak in English with customers." That small compliment stayed with me. I realized that when you break a barrier, you don't just free yourself. You open the way for others. Eventually, I decided to start a free online group for spoken English practice. I called it Voice to Rise because that's exactly what English gave me, a voice that helped me rise. Within weeks, people from different cities joined. Some shy, some confident, some completely new, but all willing to grow. I designed daily speaking challenges, topic-based practices, and mini assignments. I would host video calls and encourage everyone to speak. No judgments, no mocking, just support. One girl said, "I've never spoken English before today." Another said, "I cried after my first sentence because I never thought I could do it." These stories became my new motivation. I was now doing what no one did for me when I began, creating a safe space to speak, fail, and improve. The group grew, and we celebrated every small victory. A correct sentence, a full paragraph, the first time speaking in public. Over time, schools, NGOs, and youth centers started inviting me to speak. I would carry my story with me everywhere, not as a script, but as a reminder that change is possible. I never pretended to be perfect.